Hey, what's up everybody? Will Mosby here, back with yet another video. And in this video, we're gonna be talking about how to add the subfloor to your tiny house trailer. And more than that, this video actually we're gonna cover how to add the flashing that goes underneath, the aluminum flashing that goes underneath, how to add the insulation in between all the cross members on the trailer. And then also, we're gonna talk about how to finally finish up putting the subfloor on. Now, obviously, we already have framing up on here, so kind of backtracking on my videos. But we're gonna cover the whole thing on how to add the flashing, the insulation, and the subfloor to the tiny house trailer. Let's go. Yeah, so you can see behind me, I've already started framing and putting on the roof rafters at this point. But I wanted to go into detail exactly what I did to get the trailer ready to receive that framing, which meant I had to cover the bottom, the belly pan, and put that aluminum flashing under there. I had to install insulation in between all of the bays, and then obviously put the subfloor over the top of that. So that's what this video is all about, is we're gonna cover all three of those steps and get us ready to actually start framing. Let's go. All right, so I am at my actual build site, and obviously there's a trailer in the background. And so one of the first things that I had to do, step one, besides get it, it's not even in place. I've just kind of got it in here. It's not in its final build spot place. I'm actually gonna move it, you know, that way just a little bit, but using that little dolly. And some help, because it's fairly heavy. One of the things that I have to do first is to put the belly pan on, which is this aluminum flashing that goes underneath. This is galvanized aluminum flashing. So let's go take a look at it. I've already done obviously several rows. I'm working on the last row over here. And this stuff comes in 20 inches by 50 feet. So one roll can go all the way down and a little bit of the next section. So this is actually going to take 3 rolls of this stuff, and it's fairly expensive stuff. But I started with the middle section, and I started right here just trying to figure out my way of how this is going to go underneath. You had to cut around. There's some weld spots, like right there. There's some weld spots, and so just getting the tin snips, had to kind of cut out sections to where underneath, and I can show you underneath here, let's see. Yeah, like that. Underneath, it actually sits flush with the cross member. And it's very difficult, especially when you're starting to run with the second row and the third row, to be lined up. This one was easy. That one's easy. But the middle sections are tough, and I tried to mark my way to make sure I was kind of lined up. It's still very difficult. This one, you can just line it up against this side, this rail right here, and you know, you're on your way. There is a little bit of, what is that called, panning, you know, I don't know what it's called, but anyway, it's warping just because it wasn't quite straight, and I'm trying to straighten it as we go along. But yeah, this is what it looks like. And then here we are working on the very last section, right? Me. My daughter's here today. She's actually helping me with this last little bit. She's a big help. So big hats off to her. That's what it looks like. And that was the end of the second row right there. And so what I'll do, there's no need to like really, you know, cut this off. What I'm going to do is just come in underneath and overlap. And yeah, there's a little bit of a gap right there. There's no gaps over there, even though it is up. I'm going to actually tape the whole thing underneath using zip. We're going to tape the whole thing, so this thing will be completely sealed and air and water tight. And I'll tape up here. I'll tape all these seams, and then we're going to use gap filler and fill in all around the cracks, so there's no, you know, room where moisture can get in here. Critters, anything like that can get into this space, because what's going in next is our rigid foam insulation, or actually our foam and our rigid foam insulation is going to go in each of these bays. We'll do that next. But now let's continue on, crawl underneath, and I'll show you what that looks like. All right, so you can see me laying on my back underneath the trailer, and it is very tight in there, but I am pre-drilling with a 1/8 inch bit. And then I'm going to come back with Hillman's number 8 by 3/4 inch hex head screw. It's a self-tapping screw. And you're just going to work along each cross member just like this the whole way down. And I will say, working underneath the axles made it quite challenging because those are a drop axle. So you can see I can barely fit underneath the axle. And finally, I don't have to be on my back anymore underneath the trailer. We can start installing insulation. If you look closely at the top of the screen there, you can see that white stuff on the trailer. That is actually expanding spray foam insulation that covers up that crack where the sheet metal comes in contact with that outer wall crossmember, or not crossmember, but outer wall beam. And this is just 15-inch wide by 3.5-inch thick pink stuff insulation. And it's just softly put in, and now we're going to come back over the top of it, and you can see cutting this 1-inch rigid foam insulation. And I will definitely recommend having a respirator while working, because this foam just sprays all over the place using the table saw. And I definitely recommend using a respirator, long sleeves, gloves when putting in and installing the pink insulation. Otherwise, you could get a nasty rash like I did. So I used the table saw to cut my width of each rigid foam insulation. And now I'm using just the circular saw to cut the length. And you don't want to smash these things in there. You just want to put them in softly. They're very tight. I've got them really tight to the sides, and you're just going to leave about a 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch air gap on the top. Alright, so now that all of the insulation is in, so we have R13 pink stuff insulation below the rigid foam insulation, which is a 1-inch, that gives me an R value of R19.5. So you put the two together, this one's 6.5, the bottom one is 13, that gives us 19.5. Alright, so now I'm going to be marking the line for our tongue and groove 3/4 inch OSB subfloor that's going to be going in. Before I put the first piece down, I'm going to mark exactly all the way down where I want this piece to line up, because this is going to be the most important piece to the whole set that's actually going on. So we're going to get this one correct. It measures 47.5. If I take off the tongue, which I will on that side, it measures 47.5, but I don't want to put the 47.5 right up on the edge of that side of the trailer. What I want to do is actually back it off a 1/2 inch, because there's going to be a 1/2 inch of sheathing on the outside, and then my batting that's actually going to be going over the top of that as my covering. But so I'm going to actually go from that edge back exactly 48 inches, which should be just fine and be just perfect for us. Okay, so now we're going to pull this all the way down to the other end, snap a chalk line, and then we'll just test fit and dry fit this one in place. Let's go. So a couple of tips if you're doing this by yourself. I have zip tape holding that end of the tape up against the wall on that side, and that is really strong. That zip tape is extremely sticky, and so it's not coming off. And so now we're going to put, and be sure to have enough chalk in your line here so it coats it really well, so when you snap a line it's going to show up on there. Ask me how I know that. I made that mistake already. Alright, so we're here 48 inches in on that side, 48 inches in on this side. We've already marked our line. We're gonna get it real tight. Reach out and give it a tug. A couple times you do it, I can see it all the way down. That's good. All right, so before we lay this one down, I'm gonna come in a 1/2 inch on this end, and I have these bolts to play with. So because those were installed on purpose with the trailer, so they're welded in, and that's actually gonna secure my bottom plate, and they're positioned custom to my design from the trailer manufacturer, all the way around the whole trailer in different spots. So what I'm gonna have to do is obviously measure in, right here's where I want it. So we're gonna measure in that distance right there, and we're gonna poke a hole. And then we're gonna come over here, and we're gonna measure in that distance, and we're gonna poke a hole. And then when we're ready to, we'll lay our subfloor adhesive down, and we'll put this guy in place, and then we will screw him down. All right, so for me to maintain this 1/2 inch border out here on this side, we measure in, this post is 2 1/4 inches minus a half. That leaves me 1 3/4 inch, and there's my mark for 1 3/4 inch. So we're going to make our hole there, make our hole there, and let's dry fit the first one. So here I'm putting down Loctite's PL400 subfloor adhesive, and it's specific that it connects wood to metal. Now we're just going to lift the subfloor up, flip it over, put it on the bolts, which helps us because it lines it right up, and check all my measurements, make sure that I'm on my spot, especially that red line going through the middle of the trailer. And we're good. So now we're going to attach the subfloor to the trailer using Power Pro's 1 1/2 inch multi-material screws with the T20 head on it. But getting through this metal is very tough, and so you have to pre-drill each hole, not only using one bit, but you have to use a second bit that is a little bit larger. So I started out with an 1/8 inch bit and then jumped up to the next size up. All right, so here's what it looks like standing on top of the deck here, just walking down to the other end. But subfloor's complete. Got it all in, it's looking great. So hopefully, there you go, there's my shadow. Hopefully you found this video helpful, and you can now be successful installing your subfloor to your tiny house trailer and move on to framing. Thanks for watching.